Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to episode 12 of Sipping Tea with Stacy T. Thank you so much for being here. I see people are prompt on top of it, so I appreciate that. Really excited about talking about today's topic, which is growing pains. And for those of you who remember the show, I'm not talking about the show, though I think we saw a lot of that during that period of time as well. So we're going to talk about that before we get started, just like every other week. Well, first, before we do that, I just want to say thank you for those of you who watched last week's episode. I think it was a really fantastic topic. I've actually received a couple of not texts but responses in Instagram about it, so it was very helpful. Thank you to our expert Tiffany, that was able to give us really great insight on inside autism, as far as the life that she's living with her beautiful daughter. And again, if you do have topics that you think people need to be able to see, I think that one of the things that was powerful about last week is that everybody has kind of their own world that they live in, and it's kind of important, I think, specifically for purposes of education, obviously, but also for purposes of understanding and sometimes empathy surrounding what someone's experience is. Everybody has a different experience. People live a different life. And so it's really great sometimes to be able to see, good afternoon. It's good to be able to see what other people are experiencing. So again, thank you for that. And if you have other, topics surrounding that, I had a lot of people respond to the addiction one that I did the week prior to that. So it's good. I think that, we're hitting a sweet spot surrounding topics. I think all the topics that we've covered thus far, and at one point, I'll go over all the topics that we've covered thus far. I think that they're really important because, as far as I'm seeing, yes, there are probably other podcasts or hosts that are talking about these topics, but I'm talking about them in a perspective that is, important and that is personal to me. So I'm hoping that it hits the mark with other people, and I'm seeing that it has been. So today's tea, again, was not picked by or chosen by me. It was chosen by my mom. A little nervous about this about this tea. It is Charbrew's Moroccan Mint. You know what? I have no idea what this is going to taste like. You have probably seen the fact that, for those of you who have been on consistently or have watched it, you've seen that I've had a few of the Charbrew teas. I don't know if it's just me at this point, but they've kind of tasted the same. So I'm assuming I'm just gonna. Oh, I can smell the mint. I can already smell the mint, so that's interesting. Yeah, so we'll see how this one brews. And the other thing that's been interesting about the Charbrew teas that I've noticed is that they steep very quickly and really dark. So I'm curious to see you guys will be able to see this one clearly because I have my clear mug today. So you'll be able to see how, wow, that hot water is really hot. I mean, that's kind of the point, right? All right, so let me set that down because I'm not trying to have a burn. That's not cool. There's nothing cute about that. So all right, let me cover this back up. So how's everybody doing? How's the weather where you are? Hopefully it is good. Here it got a little too hot a little too quickly, so for people that like the heat, I'm supposing it's great, but it kind of prompted bees to come out in full force, wasps to come out in full force, and I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan of either of those things. So this is really interesting. I told you about how the other ones got dark kind of immediately. It's cold there, really. Cold temperature, like 50s or colder than that. So this is interesting. I think I told you, well, I definitely told you all how this one's steeped really dark quickly. This one is really light. So I'm curious as to what the flavor is going to be like. I'm nervous, y'all. I'm nervous. I'm not that person that, people are like, oh, I love mint. It's 48 degrees. Goodness gracious. All right. Well, for me, actually, I know people will probably think it's weird, but I'm like, oh, it sounds wonderful. I'm like, I love, I think 60 degrees, 65, 70 is like my sweet spot. Of course, you're not going to really find that anywhere forever. It's going to, go up unless you're living on an island that has like perfect weather. But even then, you're not going to get that. But in New England, you're not getting that on a regular basis. We don't even really get a spring. All right, so I'm going to try. I don't even know if I can. No, this is too hot. This is too hot. So it's good enough for my daughter, but you're in layers. Are you always cold? I think I already knew this about you, but yeah, you're probably one of the people that's always cold. Not me. I love this. I love that. This weather right here, it's in the 80s, I think, already. Man, I know that some people like that glistening look, but I don't like the sweating look. And I feel like as soon as it hits 80 degrees, I'm constantly like looking like, I need to take another shower or, wipe my face down and start fresh. So, yeah. So that's how that goes. Alrighty. So, one thing I will talk about, and as far as in general, because people have asked me this as well, this is going to be the last week that this account is an entirely private account. I will be, after this episode, actually, I'll be making it public. So anyone and everyone will see it. Whoever is on Instagram can be popping on. So I just kind of want you guys to be aware of that. That doesn't mean that it's still not going to be a safe space, because I'm going to make sure that I keep my eye on who's in there. And at one point, I may also elect to have one of you who's kind of been one of my faithfuls to kind of navigate the chat, because I don't want people acting crazy in the space. I can't control it entirely, because obviously there's going to be people that come on and say whatever, but my intention for creating this space was for it to feel like a safe space, a healing space, an encouraging space. So when I do move to have things be public, I just want you to be aware that after this session that's going to be the case. I also want to give a shout out to my crew that does work in the background that y'all don't see. So my sister does a lot of stuff in the background to make sure that that everything runs smoothly. I'm a person that's like, I'm fine if there's people here or people that are talking or whatever in the background, but my family wants it to have a certain professionalism feeling. So I appreciate my family kind of rerouting themselves when I do this every Saturday. So that's my shout outs for the session. For those of you who are just new to coming on, this is the tea that I'm going to be having: Moroccan mint char brew. I'm very nervous because I'm not one of them people that loves mint like a peppermint patty every now and again. And I do like the Andes Candies peppermint that comes with certain meals, but I'm not a mint type person, like a tea mint person. No, that's not my thing. So we'll see what it tastes like. So today's episode, I'm waiting for it to cool down because it's too hot. Today's episode is on growing pains, and it was a show back in the day for those of us who are old enough to remember that. But my intention in talking about this specific topic was that I think that as adults, we don't talk about the growing pains that we still experience. So let's go back again, as I always do, to us as kids. So I'm going back to Stacy as a kid. And I think every child, I know every child has this, is that, you go through literal growing pains where your bones and your joints hurt because they're growing, right? So, I've heard that parents are like, they get their kids clothing or shoes, and then 2 seconds later, it seems like they have to get their children the next size because they've already sized out of that. And kids may be a little bit more lethargic or, just literally achy because your body is growing. And then obviously as a female, you have growing pains when you start getting your period, and you get the lovely feelings that go with that. You guess I love that. I guess I'm still growing because of those joints. Well, we'll talk about that because, man, oh man. Yeah, I'm telling you. And it's funny when I see people that are like 70 years old and they're like, oh, I feel great. And I'm like, well, good for you. Congratulations. But, yeah, I think, that's a normal thing. Even when you think about kids teething, that's a part of growing pains. They have to have their teeth come through the skin, and it's extraordinarily painful. And for those of us who had wisdom teeth, and those cut through even when you're older, so it's like almost like a recycling or a triggering of that memory of getting older, and having that feeling, that sensation of pain. Now that continues on, and the growing pains that we experience obviously are different because our life experience are different as we start to age. So then now let's jump to, like, maybe let's say we're in 5th grade. I think that that's an interesting time. And now I know that some schools, depending on how they're set up, they have everything up to 6th grade, and I know some people went to school that they went everything up to 8th grade. But here in Massachusetts, the typical is everything to 5th grade, and then you have 6th, 7th, and 8th in middle school. Some people have junior high, which is like 7th, 8th, and 9th. So again, just like think about the general time frame of you kind of being in that last stage of elementary school, that last stage of what felt like protection, and then you're going into the next grade. And I remember when I got to 5th grade, people were like, "Oh yeah, we're the kings of the school, the queens of the school," and running things, and feeling like we knew something. Right? And I think that happens at every age. You feel like you know what you know, and you feel like you know a lot at your young age. And then you get to my age and you realize you don't know a lot. But what happens is, in that time period, you're preparing to have a growing pain, and you may not know it until like that summer, maybe a week before school starts. And when your parents are trying to get you back on that the time frame of when you have to get up for school and all that, and then you get into school that first week, that first day even, and it feels scary. You might be nauseous. You might have kids that are getting up and they're feeling really apprehensive or really nervous. And I remember feeling that way. I remember feeling, and it's weird because I knew that I was still going to be going to school with people that I had gone to school with, though based on where I lived, we were being split a bit. There were people that were a couple of streets over that now were not going to the same middle school that I was going to be going to. So it was already kind of disconnecting, and that in itself felt painful. So, you go to school, and I don't know if any of you remember that feeling of anxiety about being in a new school and not knowing who your teachers were going to be, because that's another big thing. When you go from having that one teacher that kind of does all the subjects with you, and you feel like you only have to learn their personality and their temperament, now you have a whole bunch of different teachers, and not all of them are created equal, right? Some of them may have like a little bit of lack of patience. Some of them may have expectations of you based on, what they've seen in your report cards prior. Some of them may just have expectations of what they expect all people in their class to be able to do based on the class that you're in. And so now there's, you're navigating a whole new experience with maybe new students, but also a variety of teachers, and you're trying to learn their teaching style and all of that. So that felt, for me, I remember feeling really uncomfortable, but I'm a person that even in my discomfort, I've always tried not to show it. So, the people that know me might see that I'm a little bit uncomfortable, but nope, I'm gonna be good. And I think I talked about this in a prior episode, is faking the funk. I was already good at that. I call it, and my family calls it, being a Thompson. Right? We know how to just like do our thing and move forward regardless of how we're actually feeling in a situation. But that's what we're able to do. So I was in middle school doing my thing, starting to like get a little acclimated, but remembering that now I'm with students that I have never interacted with before, and so not all of them know me. I'm not the popular kid. And for me, part of being one of the kids that people knew is I was one of the few black people. So that carried on. That did not change. However, it was a very different, interesting, it was interesting to see how I was perceived by other people. So you move through that period of time, And, one of the interesting things is, I think specifically when you have an older sibling that, has gone through school before you, people measure you. There's a metric that people kind of connect you to that person. Or you're going to do this because this one did. So my older sister ran track. Now, I did track. I want there to be a very clear distinction. And when I was younger, I did like what they call the Hershey track meets and did well in the relay races and all that, right? But as far as like actually running track, nah, I was on the track team, but running track was not my area of expertise, right? But I wanted to do it because she did it. And the expectation I think coaches had was, oh, well, Andrea, her name is Andrea. Andrea's really fast, right? And so, Stacy's probably going to be, no. Stacy does not want to run the 400. Stacy doesn't want to run. Like, if we're going to be entirely honest, if somebody's chasing me, then I will be running. But if you want me to, like, running, and I had to, obviously I was on the track team, but I did not enjoy that. So I found my sweet spot, which was the shot put, right? So that's what I enjoyed doing. I thought it was interesting. You had to learn a technique to it and all of that. But the interesting thing was going through the pains of, okay, I'm going to try to, because at first I didn't really know to articulate and say, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. And I think part of me was thinking, well, I did it before. It's not going to be anything new. Well, let me tell you, running as a kid and then running as you're starting to get older is an entirely separate beast. Because I feel like, I was fast when I was younger. I don't know what happened. And it wasn't even like I was plus size like I am now. I mean, I was always thick. I was actually quite, if I look at the pictures back then, I'm like, man, I was complaining about that. I'll take that again. But, I was pretty muscular, but I wasn't fast. And so the reality for me was, I was like, okay, this is not my area. It was hard, like saying that I couldn't do something. For me, that was one of the first, I remember, pain points for me. That was one of the first growing pains, is being like, okay, you're not good at this, right? And I know that, people will always say, oh, you should encourage your kids and they can do anything and be anything they want to be. And I get that to an extent, encouraging your children. But I would, caution people to more so think about learning what your children are good at, right? Kind of by watching and exposing them to new things, but not necessarily making them feel bad. And mine didn't. So I'm going to be clear. Mine didn't make me feel bad for not being a track star. But I'm saying I've heard a lot of parents, say, well, you should just try harder. Why can't you do it like XYZ? Well, I'm not XYZ. So I'm not going to ever be able to do it like XYZ. I can only do it like Stacy can. So I think that that's an important thing. And that's a lesson I want you to hold on to even as I, start to go up in the age ranges. So I remember, kind of discovering track was not my thing, but I really did. And I had always been singing, right? All the way through, in church, obviously, but I also was in the choirs in school, and I really enjoyed that side of things. But one of the things that was interesting is, growing up in an area where people didn't look like you, there was a lot of people that didn't understand how I would fit into a lot of the roles that were happening for like school plays or musicals. Because the reality of it is, if you look at for those of you who are not musical buffs, a lot of the musicals will have like a happily ever after, or like two characters that fall in love or connect, or, what do they call it? Star-crossed lovers, like that type of a theme, right? So that's general if you look at many of the plays and the musicals. And so me wanting to have a lead role, right? Because I really love to sing and I love to perform and I love that whole thing. But in order for me to do that, that meant potentially having me, Black woman, with white male, and that was not something that had been seen. And quite frankly, even though, it's not like I grew up in the 70s or the 60s. I mean, I was born in the 70s, but it's not like I grew up in those time frames where, you're still, very much in the Civil Rights Act and Civil Rights Movement and all those things. So I think oftentimes I like to place things in the context of history, because people all say, oh, that was so long ago. And I'm like, not really. I'm not even half a century yet. So I don't know about it being that long ago. But the reality is, for people to see that was very, very difficult. So not only was I going through growing pains, but I was experiencing this area where I grew up that had a very clear idea of what, things should look like now being challenged. And there were some people that were adamant against me being, cast against my who ended up being my castmate, right? But there were people that were like, no, no. And then the funny, not funny, haha, funny, crazy thing was that in order for me to actually be cast, and the person that fought for me, I thank him all the time. I thank him for seeing me and believing in my ability to do the job as opposed to what the job was packaged in, because for some people that was the hardest part. And I did the role, but what was interesting is they changed how the play would be, so that again there would be interactions but no kiss. We do not want that. That was just too much. So for me, I think that was a huge growing pain for me. Knowing that they changed the role, hearing about who they wanted to cast instead of me. And it's not to say that the person that they wanted to cast was not a good dancer, because my role would have to dance and sing, though I've never been trained. We couldn't afford to go to dance classes. So, I was fortunate enough that I had a neighbor who would go to dance classes, and my sister and I would go after she came home, and she would teach us the whole routines. So I wasn't able to do and go to actual class, but I had the capability to do what needed to be done as long as somebody could teach me what I needed to learn. And the interesting thing was that person did not have the singing voice, and the biggest part of that role was the singing voice component. So it was really hard just to see how much was going on in the background. And I think for me, that was one of my bigger youth growing pains, because it's not that I didn't know that all this stuff would happen in the background. It was more so that, wow, I didn't realize that I thought things kind of happened in the background. I didn't know that people worked against you in the background. And I think that for me was kind of one of the bigger moments to really see that. It's not that I hadn't seen discrimination. It's not that I didn't know racism exists. I think it's just at that point I wasn't aware of how seeing racism at work, like seeing the engine that was racism or discrimination, I wasn't able to see that. And now I'm seeing it, and it was very painful. And I remember how it impacted me. So what I would love to do is, for those of you who are watching this now, or for those of you who do watch it later when I post it on YouTube or on Instagram, do you have moments that in your youth, so like high school and younger, that you remember that were very painful moments? And did you realize it at the time, or did you realize it as you got older? Was it something you had to reflect on and say, you know what, I didn't even recognize that these people were being nasty to me, or I didn't even recognize I was being denied an opportunity? So that was one thing that happened and that was senior year. But let me tell you about another thing that happened senior year. This was a really interesting thing, because obviously senior year, if you haven't already applied for college, it's junior year going into senior year. You're applying throughout the portion of your senior year, typically in the fall semester of your senior year, so that you know where you're going to go to college, if that's your trajectory, if that's where you're looking to go. And I don't even really know. High school was the worst for you. I'm sorry. Yeah, it was rough for me too, in so many capacities. But there were so many good things, like so many things I can look back on and laugh at too. But there was a lot, especially I feel like looking at it now from the lens I have now, and also wishing that the boldness that I have now, and people would probably disagree, because I feel like I had a measure of boldness that people would be like, what in the world, where did you get that from? That I use in a variety of aspects. But I feel like I also used most of my boldness for other people and not for myself, which was really, really interesting. That's something I recognized as I got older, that I was more willing to advocate for other people than I ever was for myself. And that's not necessarily a good thing. It's good to advocate for other people, but it's important to remember that in advocating, you have to remember that you exist, right? You exist, your feelings are valid, they matter. And so it's important for you to advocate for yourself, because otherwise people will trounce you. Like, they'll trample you. And so it's interesting that I definitely taught people how to advocate for themselves, advocated for other people, but for me, that was a whole nother beast. But going back to this story of, thinking about college and all that, and it was weird, I had been sent in 8th grade, information about colleges, and I'm fairly certain I got accepted to a college in the 8th grade. I'm like, I don't think that they know that I'm only in the 8th grade, but it was called Sacred Heart College. But in any event, that was interesting. But then when I got into, high school, for some reason, and I really can't even pinpoint it, if I'm going to be entirely honest, I wanted to go to Boston College. I just wanted to go. I don't know if it's because they do a great job at advertising. You see their sportswear, their sweatshirts, their hats everywhere, right? That's all that I saw. And for me, and it was interesting because at one point I had wanted to go to Harvard, right? I had thought about it, and I was like, I wonder if I'm smart enough, right? But I talked myself out of that one, which is probably one regret I do have to this day, that I talked myself out of that. But that's life. You're young, you live, you learn, and sometimes you make those types of choices for yourself. But when I got the idea that I want to go to Boston College, I did apply to other schools as well, which is interesting because back then they didn't have like that joint application where you can send your application to all these colleges at the same time. You had to pay individually per college that you wanted to go to. So I remember, writing the essay, and I think this was the first time that I had kind of written an essay that was vulnerable, because you grow up in a household that's really private and talks about keeping things private. And in the college essays, they were like, tell me why, you feel broken in your heart or something. Like, they were like deep junk. And I'm like, what in the world? So I remember I had to, kind of be vulnerable about the space that I was in at the time. And I wrote it, kind of went about my business because I was involved in lots of stuff. I still had done track, and I did I said winter track, spring musical. And I remember we had gone to the post office. We had a post office box, and we went and got our mail, and I was looking at the mail after, and I got like literally just like a flyer. It wasn't even like a packet, right? Because you were always looking, and again, this has probably changed from back then to now, but you were looking for the thick packet. If you got a thin letter, you're like, oh man, they either waitlisted me or I got rejected. Like, you did not want to see a regular piece of mail with the college and your name on it. Like, you didn't want that. So I got this flyer, and it said, congratulations, class of 1999. And I was like, what? Oh my gosh, I got it! I distinctly remember like screaming in the car. I was like, because I was at first like confused, right? So I got in, and I remember distinctly going to my guidance counselor to talk about this. And the reason why I'm bringing up my guidance counselor is because I had gone to my guidance counselor, which we all had to go to them and talk to them about what our plans were moving forward after high school. So I went to my guidance counselor and told them I want to go to BC. And I remember specifically my guidance counselor, who shall remain nameless, said to me, well, Stacy, Boston College is really hard to get into. You should probably try something different. I don't know about you getting in there. It's really hard. You should try something a little bit lower. Like, you shouldn't aim so high. And I was like, what? First of all, excuse me, sir. I'm involved in outside activities. I'm involved in a gazillion activities in school. And that's a whole other subject for another day. But Cheryl and I were in everything. Like amanuensis. We were helping with the morning announcement videos. We were involved in lots of stuff, right? At track, and as I told you, track and musicals. And then church stuff and all that. And we had done Girl Scouts. So there was a lot, right? It wasn't like we were schlepping around, hadn't been involved, did nothing in the community, blah, 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 right? So I was looking at him, and I might add, I had like, I don't know, 94 average or something like that. So I'm in my head thinking, what in the world? Why would you say that to me? Now, if I apply and don't get in, I don't get in, but don't say that it's something that's not even attainable for me, right? And so I applied, and when I got in, I remember going to his office, and the secretary was in the area, and she was like, "Hey, Stacy, how are you doing?" I was like, "Fine, I need to speak to him." And she's like, "He's in a meeting." I'm like, "That's too bad." Burst in his office, and I said, "I got in. I got into BC." And he said, "Wow, not congratulations, wow." So that was another growing pain for me, and it was a growing pain because I had to realize at that point that not everybody's going to be happy for you and what the success that God can do for your life. Not everybody's going to champion you. Not everybody's going to cheer for you. Not everybody's going to support you. It's just not going to happen. But that was a really painful experience because that person's job is to guide you, right? So if the guidance counselor is telling you that you can't do it, then you're thinking, well, maybe I can't. All right, I see a lot of chat going on here, so I'm going to scroll back. I apologize. I got heated just thinking about it all over again. I just had a Medea moment. I got mad just thinking about it. Fifth grade is where I learned and experienced racism, also denied an opportunity. Well, I'm sorry to hear that. I didn't start advocating for myself until college out here in Wisconsin. Yeah. I applied to Hampton University and they wanted me to write an essay on global warming. I was like, nah. You know the funniest thing is global warming is not even something we talked about then. It really was not like a thing that we discussed. People were still using hairspray like it was going out of style, like the whole can of Aquanet, and I don't remember what other, like I think White Rain was another one. But we were just using hairspray, black, white, didn't matter the color. We wanted our hair to be hard and stiff. That's what we wanted. So we weren't thinking about global warming or how we were affecting the ozone layer. We weren't thinking nothing about that. Johnson and Wales, it was no essays, just the application law. You know the funny thing about that, right? Is and it's something that I've seen over time, right? In our town, we had a technical high school, and then we had the Memorial High School, and it was interesting seeing how people spoke about the tech kids, right? As if they were not intellectual, as if they couldn't, they couldn't get in and do the regular schoolwork, so that's why they went there. And I'm like, no, they just might have also wanted to work with their hands a lot. I loved when I had shop classes. So we actually had shop, we had home ec, which I think they're now trying to bring back because kids can't even put on a daggone button on their shirts. So, I mean, for goodness sake. So like the basics of that type of a thing. So they're trying to do that again because they recognize there's a value in doing that. Now, if you look at Asia, I don't know if you guys have seen any of these videos, but I specifically watch like the kindergarten, like the elementary school videos. These kids, they have them cooking in kindergarten, chopping vegetables. I'm like, what in the world is going on? But they have these kids already exposed to so much that, and they're already, of course, learning English, right? We don't know any of the Asian languages typically, but they know English. And it's because there's a different focus on how things can be done. And we kind of see things, just one tunnel vision, one narrow way. So going back to, that experience that I had, and thank you all for sharing your experiences, is, having that experience in the fifth grade, and then having that going from fifth grade into middle school, and then going from middle school into high school, and then having those two kind of prominent experiences with growing pains, I think was really necessary. So while you're going through a period of growing pains, it is never fun. It's never exciting. It's not something that you want to continue on. You kind of hope that at some point that, something, what do you call it? You flip a switch and then everything changes. But that's not the reality of it. Again, I don't like pain, right? I don't like inflicting pain on myself. I don't like seeing people in pain, but I do understand what can come out of pain. All right, so this has cooled down a little bit. I'm gonna try it now. You guys are probably like, she's not gonna drink that tea. So let me try it. It's the Moroccan mint tea. Okay, I'm glad it's not as bad as I thought because the mint is very faint. It's actually really good. I like it that it's faint. I can taste it, and this is with no sweetener whatsoever. So that's a good sign. I was hoping that it didn't get any darker. I feel like I taste the mint on my tongue more now than when I was actually drinking it. But I'm also tasting like it's a very their tea brand is really a strong. If you're not a tea drinker, I don't know if you would like it. You should try it, right? But I feel like it is a strong black tea. Like I don't know where. I think it does say on the back where it is. It's from Sri Lanka. So I don't know if that's I don't know if anybody knows about tea from Sri Lanka specifically, but it is really strong. But they added a good faintness of the mint, so good job. This one I give this one I give a thumbs up. I'm gonna have to send Charbrew a thank you on this one because I like this one. So we have now gone all the way through high school and we're about to go to college. Now, what I will also say is before, this is the interesting thing. I've kind of walked you guys through some very, basic, some very basic moments in time. But what I didn't tell you is as I'm going through, and as my family's going through all this, we also had housing difficulties, right? And, trying to navigate, not having anywhere that's stable, right? We had friends of the family that were taking us in, and we were navigating, moving around, and try to, if you can, imagine. And this is not a thing that's unrealistic to many people. Many people have gone through, losing a home. But imagine you are in middle school, in high school, and you're trying to navigate, not having the home. I think actually we're both in high school. Trying to figure out how that works. And also at the time, there are now laws in place because so many people have dealt with housing insecurity and losing a home or what have you, that kids when this happens get displaced. Maybe they're in the shelter system, maybe they're in a different part of the state. Now they have laws that are enacted that transportation will take that child from where they are staying to the high school where they still were, or the school. So helpful. So helpful. For us, we were having to get up at the crack of dawn and drive to, back into where we were in order to go to school. That's really a lot to manage, not just the physicality of it, which was exhausting, but also the emotional component of it, because now because high school time frame is also the time frame where you're trying to gel with people that you are that you're in school with, and you're really kind of learning how to navigate more complicated relationships. And I think that when you're trying to do that, but you're also having all this sense of instability in your life, which is where having a roof over your head, people underestimate that. That's a huge portion of the stability that we feel in our lives. So not having that obviously adds all these additional senses of who you are, right? That's a huge, if you don't know who you are and you're trying to navigate, being a teenager, trying to get good grades, trying to be involved in all these activities, trying to be successful, trying to set yourself up for your next step, that is a lot. That's growing pain on top of growing pain on top of growing pain. But it's also when you have to be very discreet about it. Because as I said, they didn't have the laws back then that they do now in order to help people navigate that hardship for young people. Because I think oftentimes when people think about, excuse me, a family losing a home or moving away from a home or whatever, being disconnected from a home, they think about the parents. What are the parents having to navigate? What did the parents not do? Which is often not the case, FYI. But that's where people go in their brain, because people are judgmental by nature, right? But they don't really stop and say, man, how are those kids feeling? How are they handling this? What is going on? The parents think about that, but outside people don't. And so I'm just trying to, express to you that even when you're having like an external growing pain, something that a lot of people see, that doesn't mean you're not having internal growing pains. So familiar growing pains, a lot of stuff based on, when you grew up, the time frame, what you grew up. Because this generation now is different. They tell everything. They're like, I ain't keeping nothing a secret. I don't care who it affects or who gets locked up, whatever. I am not doing that. We grew up in the snitches get stitches, keep what happens in this house generation. So when you have a very different upbringing, you keep a lot of stuff privately, and sometimes that can be really, add to the growing pains that you're experiencing externally. So I just wanted to share that. So now we have graduated and we're going to the college. And I remember my family thinking, so it was, and it's a funny, silly story, but I just remember, my whole family moving me in, even a friend of the family who just recently passed away helped move us in. That's when you could bring cinder blocks. You can't do that now. But that's when you can bring cinder blocks up to, jack up your beds off the floor so you can, shove your, what do you call those things? The boxes. I can't remember what they're called, but you carry all your stuff in there. Your like some people would put their desks underneath there, but I wasn't doing that. But some people put their desks underneath there and all that stuff. So it's now very different. They have a lot of tools that you could use to do that, but we use cinder blocks. So I remember being dropped off and being excited. I was excited, but I was also petrified. But my family, I don't know. I'm curious because they were surprised that I was nervous. Some of them were like, but you introduced yourself to everybody and you were saying, hey, how you doing? My name is Stacy. Yeah, because y'all was still there. So I felt safe. I had my backup squad. When they left, let me tell you, it was a pitiful time. It was a pitiful time because this was a huge growing pain because I was alone for the first time. And I had never had that. I've never, my sister and I literally were always, my younger sister and I were always together, 2 years apart, always together. And I'm like, oh my gosh, she's my younger sister, but she's like my support system. Now what am I supposed to do? I don't know these people, right? So I remember my mom had given me this huge bin of animal crackers. That's what I ate for I don't know how many days. I laugh about it now, but I'm like, I was so afraid. And people are like, but you're mouthy. And I'm like, it's very interesting how people don't understand the difference with when you're comfortable, right? So when you're comfortable, yeah, you can say all sorts of stuff. You can, seem brave or bold and all that stuff. But I'd never been separated from my family before. And this was after we had really gone through a very hard time. We had just, I think, gotten into a place that we're going to be staying in, but literally it was a very, very difficult time. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so weird to be separated. And then when I called these jokers later and I was like, what are y'all doing? They're like eating lobster. I'm like, well, my God, what are you celebrating? Celebrating that I'm not there? Which is my favorite food. So I was like, well, geesh. And then, I was like, what are you guys doing? So afraid to go out. And I remember the only reason I ended up going out was because I thought I had a class. They had canceled it, but I didn't know they had canceled it. But I met one person, Sharia, that's her name, met her. And from then on was able to go to the dining hall and eat real food. It's so funny how you think. Because in my head, I'm like, man, I ain't going to be nothing. I'm just going to go to the dining hall. How many times have you gone to the cafeteria in high school or in, middle school or in elementary school? You did all that. It's not a big deal. But now that you have to do it on your own, man, I was like, I have no idea how to navigate this. I was so shook on how to do that. High school helped me to understand everybody will not be your friend. That's for sure. Growing pains in college were interesting because now you're transforming from a child into an adult. You said, not me. Well, I did that too, but I did that after. That first week was rough for me. I literally was starving. I can't even imagine. I remember being in the line for food and I got so much food and they were looking at me And that was back when I can't remember the name of the specific drink that everybody was drinking at the time. And I remember I got like 3 or 4 of those, and I got like a chicken sandwich, I got French fries, I think I got a burger. I was starving, so I don't even know why people were trying to talk to me, because I didn't want any parts of what they were saying. I was trying to eat because I was hungry. But I think that for me, and I ended up going out and hanging out and partying and stuff, which was so interesting because I didn't grow up like that at all. But at this point, I think I was trying, well, part of the growing pains was trying to figure out, did I know who I was on my own? Right. And I think that that's a huge point that everybody goes through. Whether or not you go away to school, there's a point in time where you're like, do I know who I am? And do I have enough foundation of who I want to be that when other people come my way, they're not able to sway me one way or the other? That is a huge, huge telling point. And for me, I think at the first, I kind of knew who I wanted to be. I think the biggest thing is I always felt in a bubble. And so I popped the bubble a little bit just to see, what was what. But I discovered very quickly who I wanted to have in my circle and who I didn't. So even in school, even though I was hanging out and, dancing and all those types of things, I very much had like a fine line of, I'm not doing that. I don't know what y'all are doing over there, but I'm not doing that. I definitely had that. That's because my mom was strikes and I could hang out everywhere. Your mom was strict and I couldn't hang out everywhere. I think a lot of us grew up with, parents that had seen a lot that we would call strict. And maybe they were, but I think they had seen a lot or they hadn't seen a lot, but they knew that there was a lot out there they didn't want for us. And so, but there's a fine line. I think some parents were so strict that it automatically, those kids went buck wild when they're like, see ya, right? And they went buck wild. They went the total opposite direction. The growing pain in college was trying to find out who you are as an adult. And, the funny thing is, obviously many of us are several years removed from that experience of college. But what I will say is, I think that that's still an ongoing journey, right? Finding out who you are and who you want to be. And this goes back to one of the other episodes that I had which was, when did we stop dreaming? Because there is a point in time, and I think for me, I remember, I can tell you the point in time for me. I graduated from school, and before I had graduated, my father passed away. And, that was an interesting, again, it was an interesting thing. It was the year before I graduated from BC. And I remember feeling like this feels so odd. Like it was an odd feeling because now it was like navigating a whole new existence without having, that voice, that feeling, that energy, right? So I'm like, okay, I have to navigate this new thing. So that in itself was a growing pain for my family because we had to learn how to do things differently. We had to learn that we had to lean on each other. We didn't have, and my father, for all that he was definitely a huge, huge networker. He could get anybody to do anything for him whenever, right? My friend, hey, my friend, can you do this for me? Can you get me? Hey, my friend, I need a favor. Like, he was really, really good at networking. And so we didn't have that, like that energy, that force, because he was a force. We didn't have that anymore. So it was navigating that, another growth point, another growing pain that we had to navigate as a family. And then my brother passed away a few years after that. So literally at that point, without my nephew, who was a child at the point, we literally had no males in the household. So it was like, what in the world? Like, how do you navigate this? How do you, that was a huge growing pain for the family. How do you navigate not having any males, any adult males in the family? Who do you go to for certain things? It seems the simple things, like, when your car needs to be fixed, or when you need to get a new car, or when you need the lawn to be mowed, or the trash to be taken out. And I'm not just talking about gender role stuff, because my father was a cook, and my brother was an excellent cook, so it wasn't that, but it's just like the things that you didn't typically have to even think about, now you're having to think about, right? So all of those, when you navigate people being disconnected from you from death or from whatever reason. There are lots of reasons why people disconnect. Even navigating that pain can be really, really challenging. How do we do that? And growing and like I said, graduating college and then navigating that was what kind of forced me into the stopping dreaming phase of my life, right? Because I was like, okay, my father's not here. I need to be able to come home and make sure that my family is good. My sister was still, I think, yeah, she was still in college. I'm like, wait a minute, yeah. And so, but navigating, making sure that things were good, and then we had another housing issue. The person that owned the home that we were in decided to sell it, and so again, another growing pain. So this is the thing: can you navigate life's growing pains? Because they're going to happen. What do they propel you to do? Do they propel you to be forward thinking, positive, or do they spiral you into despair? And I can tell you, I've been in both ends of that spectrum. I've definitely been in the, man, like, can't, and I'm not gonna say can I catch a break, because that's but I'm saying, like, that was a mentality back then, right? But the reality of it is, you will have growing pains. If you keep living, you're going to keep having them. So how do you adapt and adopt what they are? How do you adopt the progress that it can be made and should be made as you're navigating these things, so that you don't feel so overwhelmed that you're just stuck? And I think we've all been in that place where we just feel stuck. Nothing is happening. There doesn't seem to be any progress. Everything just seems blah. So how do you navigate those things? And for me, that's one of those things that I consistently think about. Doesn't mean I've mastered it, because in all truth, I don't think you master it. I think you go to God about it, because I definitely know I do. I have to, because otherwise I can feel stuck really quickly. I can feel overwhelmed. And even right now in my job search, where my job search has not been going that great as far as what I'm thinking it needs to be, but I know that even though I can feel stuck in this situation, that God is already working stuff out that I don't even know, right? Like, and I already said, I'm like, God, this is a you thing, because I don't know what direction, I don't know exactly what doors you want to open for me, but whatever you open for me, these are the things that I really need, because of X, Y, and Z. So I think that it's important for me, part of me navigating adult growing pains, because they're going to continue to happen, is how often am I talking to God about it? How often am I, having conversation? Am I allowing for myself to sit in a despaired space? Or am I saying, nah, Stacey, we're not going to do that today. Like, we're not going to do that. I get it. Things feel cruddy. Things might feel dark. You may not see the pathway out or through, but just keep getting up every day and keep saying, okay, God, this is a you thing. I literally say it. I'm like, this is a you thing. I can't see it. I don't know what is what, but I know you're going to have to work this out, and I know you're going to figure this out and give me the direction. I want you to also recognize that, as I talked about, people not always being happy for you, that continues on, right? There'll be a lot of, as you get blessed or as you navigate through your growing pains, there are going to be people who say, oh my gosh, I'm so happy for you. But, like, do their actions show that? Right? Do they show up to cheer you on? Do they, where are they in the scheme of that experience? Because people will show you who they are, right? So one of your growing pains might also be navigating relationships that don't serve you well, right? That can also be navigating that. Another growing pain that you might have is getting out of your own head, right? A lot of us get stuck in our own head and our own process and the way that we think things are going to go. So we can get stuck in that. And it's like, I remember my sister one time said, sometimes you just have to jump. Like, enough. You can process everything. You can try to plan everything out. You can try to note everything down. You can try to, be very particular about how everything is planned. And I'm not saying you shouldn't plan, right? Without a vision, the people perish, right? It's in the word. That being said, the vision doesn't mean that it's going to happen the way that the end result, right? But the pathway, the journey, man, that journey, you think it's going to be a straight line, good luck for you. If you're looking for the journey to be a straight line, because there's going to be peaks, valleys, all that stuff. Being stuck in your head is no joke. It's not. It's crippling. It really, truly is. Being stuck in your own head, or even replaying foolishness that other people have said to you, that now you play like it's a daggone radio song in your head, right? Oh, I'm not going to be able to achieve. I'm not going to have this. Or, I'm this age and it's not going to happen. And I remember hearing, my pastor has said it multiple times, too long is not too late. And I'd be like, okay, yep, I know, Bishop, I know. And sometimes it gets aggravating to hear that, but it's true. Because we have zero idea of how God is going to work, the things out that he's going to work out. And I say this often, we see time. He sees eternity. So he sees the whole plan already mapped out. We're just like kind of living in this one little piece of time and trying to navigate it. So know that growing pains do two things. They grow you, right? Because that's growing. They challenge you. So those are the two things that do. So they grow you and they challenge you. And now you have to decide what is the end result. Because if I'm growing, am I growing forward, or am I growing in the opposite direction? And if I'm challenged, am I being challenged to move forward, or am I so challenged and I can't see a way to navigate through that I just stop? And so that's really, really important. My pastor just said Wednesday, God is not slow, we are just in a hurry. Man, that's good. That's good. I probably would have been like, I ain't trying to hear that. It's the truth. But there are some days that I'm like, I'm not trying to hear that. Doesn't make it any less true. And I think oftentimes we are in a hurry because, people, and part of it is that people always say, God is coming soon, God is coming soon. So it gives you that almost anxious feeling of wanting to do so many things and achieve so many things and have so many experiences in a very short, finite time. So when they keep saying God's coming soon, I'm like, wait a minute, hold up, but I still need to do and I still want to do. And, I think that's part of why that feeling happens. So I don't necessarily I don't think the church understands that the saying of those things can build that feeling of, wanting to hurry up. So, but that's a very, very good point. Well, hopefully you have thought about growing and your growing pains. And pain also is an indicator that we're alive. So we're alive, and yes, things may happen in a plan, in a time frame that, kind of makes it feels painful, because there are some things that I will say the time frame of them has felt painful, but I still know God is faithful in the midst of all that. Our plans may not be his plans, that's for sure. That is 100% the truth. Well, I want to thank you all for joining in on episode 12. Episode 13 is going to be with, and this is if she can still do this, but it's supposed to be with a former colleague of mine on the school committee. And this is going to be, as many of you know, I was an elected official, and she said she's really interested in doing it. She said next week works for her, so I'm just going to confirm that again. But I'm excited to talk about, what it is to run as a female, what it is to run in an area where you've never run before, and what it is to serve. So we'll be talking a little bit about that. All right. Well, thank you guys so much. I appreciate you. Be blessed. And as I always say, I said at the end of every one of my episodes, be kind to yourself, be kind to others, and extend to yourself, and please to me, a measure of grace. See you next Saturday. Have a good one. Bye, everyone.